collapse. Guidelines advising people to avoid eating fatty foods like butter and cheese were introduced 30 years ago and, well, most of us have been following them ever since. They recommended that fat consumption be limited to reduce the risk of heart disease. But new research suggests the dietary guidelines shouldn't have been introduced because there wasn't enough evidence at the time. For more on this, we're joined by the dietitian and nutritionist, Dr. Schenker. Dr. Schenker, thanks very much for your time. Let's be absolutely clear what this news today is not saying. It is not saying it is fine for me to run out after my shift and chow down on some deep-fried Mars bars.
No, it's not saying that at all. What it's saying is that we need to take a much more in-depth, considered look at the different types of fats that are in our diets. So the different types of saturates, for instance, we know that they're not all the same, and we know that it's not helpful to tell just blanket advice to say to people, give up fat, because what they'll do is they'll just eat more carbohydrate, particularly refined carbohydrates, which are implicated in diabetes and obesity. So we need to pick out the types of fats that we want to encourage people to eat. And foods like avocados and oily fish and nuts, they often have lots of healthy fats in them, but they'll have some saturated fat present as well. And so if you're always focusing on reducing saturates and overall fat, you could be missing out on very healthy foods too.
I can just about work out the distinction between saturated and unsaturated fats, but nowadays we've also got trans fats to worry about, a whole host of others. I mean, the simple point is, not all fats are bad for you.
No, that's right. In fact, some fats are positively very good for you. They carry fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, vitamin E, which are, very important vitamins in the body. They carry essential fatty acids that the body can't make, so we need them in our diets. So we must be more clear about the kind of advice we're giving. And I think it's more helpful to talk about foods than it is to talk about maybe components of food like fats or carbohydrates, and give people practical advice. So you can say, for instance, avocados, nuts, they make great snacks between meals, or if you want to incorporate them in salads or something like that, that's absolutely great. And choosing oily fish over maybe fattier cuts of meat. But it's just trying to encourage the positive all the time with people rather than saying don't, don't, don't. And at the end of the day, if somebody prefers butter to margarine or spread, that's fine, because really how much would you actually eat compared to, like you just said at the beginning, sort of indulging on big amounts of cakes and biscuits and buns, which we know are very Moorish and you can overeat on. It's quite hard to overeat on butter, for instance.
Still, the majority of the British public do now have at their fingertips more information about their food than ever before. We may well be seeing heart disease, the risk of heart disease, instances of heart disease in the United Kingdom, I should say, coming down, but we're seeing far more obese people than ever before.
That's right, and that could be very implicit in this kind of low-fat culture where we've swapped fats for sugars and refined carbohydrates. I think there is a clear link here. So we need to be very, this advice needs to be looked at, and we need to look at our proportions, how much fat is healthy, how much saturated fat can we eat, where's that saturated fat coming from? If it's coming from coconuts or other healthy foods, that's not such a bad thing, and just getting or cutting down on a lot of these so-called starchy carbohydrate foods that aren't actually very good for us. So the refined breakfast cereals, the refined pastas, white bread, that type of thing, and always choosing whole grain.
Dr. Schenker, dietitian and nutritionist, thanks very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.